In this video, I'm going to show you how to get Nintendo DS games up and running within the Xbox Series X and S version of Retroarch. Nintendo DS emulation is not something that has traditionally been found on consoles due to the fact that DS emulation has required a lot of raw CPU power. Most consoles up to this point just have not had enough to brute force their way through a majority of the DS library. Thanks to the upgraded CPUs in the Xbox Series S and X, however, it has honestly become quite trivial for this system to run these games. And not only that, it's really easy to run them once you have Retroarch installed. So the UWP version of Retroarch includes 3 Nintendo DS cores. There is the Melon DS core, DSMUMI core, and then DSMUMI 2015. So for this video, we're going to be using DSMUMI 2015, mainly because I couldn't get regular DSMUMI to even load a game. It just will not work with them. Every setting I've tried has just resulted in nothing. It just doesn't like this core for some reason. I don't know. Maybe in a future update we'll see it get restored. I don't know. Maybe some other people have had luck getting it running. If you have, let me know. But I just haven't been able to get it to run. And then the Melon DS core is just really new still. Like, Melon DS is a very new emulator, so it doesn't have the compatibility of DSMUMI 2015 or a lot of the functions that I like having in a DS emulator, like Stylus control. So for this video, we're going with DSMUMI 2015. So to get DS games up and running in DSMUMI 2015, all you really need are some Nintendo DS games. You can dump your own using a 3DS, or you can search Google and other shady places to find them. I'm not going to be providing download links, as that is considered illegal and puts my channel at risk, so sorry, not going to do it. Once you have your games, you're going to want to put them on a fast USB flash drive or SSD. I've had issues with mechanical hard drives on the UWP version of Retroarch that the Xbox Series S and X uses. So for this video, I am once again using my PNY USB 3.1 512 gig flash drive. Once your DS games are placed on the drive, you're ready to hook it up to your Xbox Series X or S. Now, it shouldn't matter which USB port you plug this drive into. I've had it work on all 3. I believe the back 2 are preferred, but you should be fine no matter where you place it. If this is your first time hooking the flash drive up to an Xbox console, it will ask you if you want to format it for USB storage for Xbox games, or if you want to use it as a media storage option. Choose media. Once the drive is detected, go ahead and boot into Retroarch. This guide is a continuation of my Xbox Series X Retroarch install guide, so there are a number of settings that will load up default every time I load into Retroarch. If you need to refer to those settings, go check out that original video here. Now that Retroarch is loaded, we could go ahead and begin loading up Nintendo DS games. You should just go down to load content, scroll down to the E drive, Nintendo DS games, and then you could just select a game and start playing. I don't like doing that method. It's long and I just don't care for it. So instead, I'm going to show you how to set up a Retroarch playlist so you can just select all of your DS games directly from this main menu. So from this menu, just press left on your D-pad until you get to the Import Content selection menu here. Now we're going to click on Scan Directory. We're going to go to the E drive, select the Nintendo DS game folder that you have on your flash drive, or SSD, or hard drive, or whatever you decided to plug in, and then click Scan this directory. Once the scan is finished, you can back out to the main menu once again, and there should be a Nintendo DS icon over here. If it doesn't appear for you like it didn't for me, you could do this with a manual scan. Select your content directory. Choose your system name as Nintendo DS. Default core, we're going to choose DSMUMI 2015, so press right on your D-pad to go down to the Nintendo section quicker. Make sure Scan Recursively is selected, so that way it'll search subfolders if you have them, and then hit Start Scan. And that's what should have popped up the first time. I don't know why it didn't for me. If it doesn't for you, there's the backup method for doing that as well. But now we could just go ahead and select a game and tell it to run. Ta-da! DS emulation running on an Xbox console. How great is this? It looks great, and it runs just so well on everything that I've been able to test on it so far. Like, I haven't come across a single game that hasn't run just as it should so far. I mean, that could possibly change. There's a ton of DS games out there, but everything that I play is working great, and I couldn't be happier about that. So for those of you looking to just get basic DS emulation up and running, that's really all there is to it. You just pop the games onto a thumb drive, plug it into your Xbox with Retroarch installed, and load them up in SMWiz 2015. But there are a number of additional options you might want to tweak with, and I'm going to go ahead and cover those there, including how to get your emulated stylus set up onto the right analog stick so you can play more games. So, for example, that Pokemon Diamond demo that I was showing off when we first loaded the core, I actually couldn't progress into the game because I didn't have the touchscreen emulated yet. Let's go ahead and cover those options now. I'm going to go ahead and cover the critical ones first, like that DS stylus, just so we could get you out of here a little bit quicker. Go into your quick menu. I have my hotkey set to start and select. You can set your hotkey to whatever you'd like in the main options of Retroarch. Scroll down to options, and let's go and enable that pointer mode for the right analog stick. So by default, it is set to none. We're going to set this to emulated. There's also absolute, which will always keep it centered. I do not like this, personally. You might. I don't. So then there's also press. So if you just move the right analog stick around, it's always pressed. If you use one of these ones, you have to press the right trigger to make it so it emulates a press, which I prefer. But if you're playing a game where it always needs to be pressed, like Zelda or something, this might be preferable for you. But anyway, set that to emulated. And then you can also set a dead zone if you need to. But now when we go back into our game, we can move around an emulated analog stick and use the touchpad. Pressing the right trigger and it's simulating touchscreen. And that will let you play an overwhelming majority of the DS library. The next option I want to cover here real quick is actually the emulated microphone. There are a number of DS games that require you to blow into a microphone. So you can actually set up different things here. So I typically use sample and random to do this. And then after you have that enabled, as you can see in the DS control settings, there is a toggle microphone button here. So left thumb button. So click down on the left thumb button and it will say that you are blowing into the microphone. Now there are other DS games that require you to open and close the lid to activate certain features. That is done with the left trigger by default. So just to give a brief demonstration here, I can close my lid and then open the lid back up. It kind of just gives you this graphical garbage, but that's okay. But those are pretty much the only two mandatory settings that you're going to need. So for everyone that just wants to go play DS games, congrats, that's it. For the rest of you, I'm going to go over the rest of the core options now that are going to be used. So first up is internal resolution. I do not recommend changing this on the Xbox Series X or S. DS emulation, like I said, is extremely CPU demanding, and increasing this has caused lag, even in Mario Kart DS. Like, even going up to 2x has caused lag for me. So honestly, I recommend leaving this just at its native 256 by 192. If you have integer scaling enabled, it looks beautiful. If you want to experiment by up-resing, you just select it and then restart the content and it'll have the higher res. But like I said, I've had lag in even the most undemanding games. Next up is CPU cores. This will tell SMWiz 2015 how many of the Xbox Series X and S's cores it can use. You can go ahead and crank this up to 4 for increased performance. For the CPU mode and JIT block size, just ignore those. Screen layout, this lets you change which screen is on top or bottom, or if you want to have them side by side to get a little bit bigger of a presentation. Top only, bottom only. Quick switch, so with quick switch you can actually switch between them while they have this full screen ability here. So you can just click on the right thumbstick and it'll swap between the two screens at the bigger size. That one's pretty cool, I like this one. And then there's these hybrid ones where you could have the main screen be over here, but still have access to the subscreen over on the right. And you can enable or disable if both of those are showing, or if just one is showing. And then here's that pointer for the stylus that we saw. You can actually disable the pointer if you want to. It makes it really hard to use without the pointer, so I don't recommend that. Pointer type mouse. We don't actually have access to mouse and touchscreen options here, so this is pretty much useless. You can change the pointer color to what you prefer. There's a number of options available. The pointer analog mode, if you would like to have it on the left analog stick instead of the right, you can, but I mean, DS games get played with the D-pad, so my left hand's kind of busy doing that. You can also emulate stylus jitter. I mean, I really haven't noticed this being necessary, so I just leave it off. Next is the ability to load a game completely into memory when you start it. This is good if you have a hard drive that is not reading very fast. You enable this, it loads the entire game into RAM beforehand, and you don't have to worry about it. Next is the screen gap. The DS had a physical gap between screens due to the hinge, so you can actually emulate what that should look like. And then the rest of these options you can kind of just leave alone, besides the microphone one we covered earlier, of course. But that pretty much covers all the options. Now the last thing I'd like to bring up in today's video is shaders. So if you go into your quick menu, scroll down to the shaders tab, press A, you will get a video shaders slider here that you need to enable. Now, you do need to have shaders downloaded, so if you don't have these downloaded already, just back out to the main menu and go to Online Updater, and update the GLSL shaders. Once those are downloaded and extracted, we can go back into our quick menu, Shaders tab, and load a shader preset. So, shaders GLSL. Let's go down to the handheld section here. Now, unfortunately, there isn't a Nintendo DS handheld border enabled by default on Retroarch yet. Don't know why, but there just isn't. But that's okay. There is a DS LCD shader. So there's two options here. There's the Nintendo DS LCD shader. This will mute the colors and make it look like an actual Nintendo DS. And that's what it looks like here. So you can see it mutes the colors quite a bit compared to what emulation could provide. The other DS shader lets you have those LCD panel type attributes, but it doesn't mute the colors as much. And since we're using Desmumi 2015, we are getting some weird artifacting here on Pokemon Diamond, but that's okay. Another shader you might be interested in trying out is the LCD Grid shader plus motion blur. This really emulates the look of a DS really well. Gives you the nice scan lines, and then you can see that there is just that hint of motion blur that you would get from the low quality Nintendo DS screen. So this is far and away the most authentic. It might not be your favorite though, so experiment and see what you think. Anyway, once you have everything in the Nintendo DS core set up how you like it, make sure that you save it as a core override. So on the quick menu here, there's an overrides tab. Press A, save core overrides. This way, anytime you load up a Nintendo DS game, these are the settings that are going to greet you. If you want to save a per game override, you can also do that here with save game overrides. And that covers it as far as Nintendo DS emulation is concerned on the Xbox Series S and X. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope this tutorial has helped you out. If you happen to have any questions, go ahead and ask me in the comments section below. I'll do my best to try to help you out and get your DS games up and running. But now, if you could do me a favor, make sure you hit that thumbs up or thumbs down button, just depending how much you like today's video. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit that sub button so you can see future tutorials just like this one. But that's going to do it for this video, so until next time, you wonderful internet folks, stay awesome, and we'll see you back next video.